Okay, so this is a recording that I'm doing, brief recording on Julius Caesar, just for a refresher, something that you can look over while you're preparing for the exam on Monday. So I'm not going to go through the detailed readings that we did in class, okay, since we've already done that. What I want to do is just a kind of refresher to remind you of the more important issues and aspects of the play that you do want to be attentive to. So, in terms of themes that you want to be looking at, questions you want to ask yourself about the play, think in terms, to begin with, of heroes and villains. Who are the heroes? Who are the villains? Right? Remember our primary characters, Brutus and Caesar, and Mark Antony and Cassius. Okay. What do we make of them? We have to be attentive to their evolution, if there is an evolution in the character. Of course, the primary focus in this case would be with Brutus, right? We want to be attentive to Brutus's motivations, right? If we look at Julius Caesar, right, we recognize in his character ambition. We know that he is flawed, physically flawed. We know this, right? In that he can't hear out of one ear, right? And he is prone to these types of fits, kind of epileptic fits. Always keeping in mind that we read everything literally and figuratively. So when we are told that he can't hear out of one ear, it's also suggestive that he can't hear what people are telling him. So when the soothsayer says, "Beware the Ides of March," he doesn't pay attention to it. And it is a kind of prophecy, if you will, telling him, or certainly to tell him to anticipate that he needs to watch out on that specific date. Can't hear that, right? He ignores it, but then we see how that relates to the literal and physical elements of his character. The same thing when we see him, when we are told that he has these types of fits, right? That alerts us that there's something wrong. So it makes us suspicious to some degree, because you keeping in mind, why does Brutus agree to join the conspirators? He's friends with Caesar. And we know that the reason that he does join Cassius and the other conspirators to conspire to kill Caesar is he is concerned that Caesar's ambition will lead him towards becoming a tyrant, right? This moment where the concern, particularly for Brutus, is that the Roman Republic will, with a tyrant, be transformed into an empire with dictatorial type of rule. But as was emphasized in class, we have to remember that we haven't fully seen Caesar adopt that position. It's suggested, but it's not there. So Brutus, in his musings about whether or not he should join Cassius and the others, is in anticipation of what Caesar will become, not necessarily of what he actually is now. So this brings up a whole bunch of issues related to Brutus and to the play in general, about the concept of loyalty, right? Loyalty to Caesar, he's your friend, versus loyalty to the state, loyalty to Rome. And Brutus is torn between these two. What takes precedent? His responsibilities to preserve the Republic? How far is he willing to go to preserve that Republic, to protect that Republic from a tyrant that he perceives Caesar is or will become? And of course, we ask ourselves, did Brutus make the right choice? Now, the play, as the plot plays out, the irony is that Rome, in fact, goes from a republic into an empire, into a tyranny, as a result of Brutus's actions. Obviously not what Brutus anticipated. He thought and went in with conceivably good intentions. But it doesn't work out that way. And one of the questions is, should have he been a little more astute in his anticipation of what the results could be, because they are killing the leader, committing murder. So we have the whole moral issue and ethical issue as to whether or not there's a justification for killing Caesar, given that it's more in anticipation and speculation of what Caesar will become, right? Tied up into all of this, of course, is the idea of preserving the Republic and doing what's best for the Roman citizens and the Roman people. And a reminder how the play starts with the citizens, the people, who are now celebrating Caesar. Well, you thing to keep in mind with the citizens, and they play the people, they play an important role, is their shifting attitudes, who they're supporting now and who they're going to support tomorrow, right? And that's a big part of this, that the people are fickle, that they can easily change their devotion from one leader to another. Right? And that's emphasized to us at the beginning of the play in that whole opening scene when they're being chastised. And now they're all supporting Caesar, and yet months ago they were supporting the other, etc. Of course, that also comes very much into play in the pivotal, arguably the pivotal scene of the play, which is Mark Antony's speech, right? We spent a lot of time with that. So yes, that is something you want to be attentive to that speech. It's important, okay? And let's just, a quick reminder, because again, this is just a review, a quick reminder of what leads up to that speech. After the conspirators with Brutus, after they execute Caesar, Mark Antony, remember, Mark Antony is a close ally of Caesar. And when Mark Antony comes back after he initially runs away after the murder of Caesar, he has a conversation with Brutus and the others, and Brutus decides, against Cassius's objections, to allow Mark Antony to speak to the people. The thinking from Brutus's perspective is it would be best for the future of Rome, now that Caesar is dead, to reunite. And if Mark Antony can be brought on board, that would help to keep the people on board and accept what the conspirators did, that it is in fact for the good of the Republic. Mark Antony plays that part well. He does deceive Brutus, whereas Cassius is suspicious, says you can't let him speak, because if he speaks against us, then the people will be against us. But Brutus is confident, arguably overly confident, that no, Mark Antony will be okay, don't worry about it, because I'm going to speak first. And I will tell the people that we're permitting Mark Antony to speak. And that would somehow convince perhaps Mark Antony and certainly the people that Mark Antony is on board with this. Okay? So it's, again, this is a flaw in Brutus because it is a mistake. Cassius is right here. And Cassius does come across very much as more shrewd than Brutus. Right? Brutus tends to be a bit naive. He doesn't realize, because remember, Cassius, when Cassius is feeling Brutus out, is manipulating Brutus to a large extent, because Cassius, at the beginning of the play, wants Brutus on board to help out in the plot to kill Caesar. Why does he want Brutus on board? Because the people love Brutus, and if Brutus is part of the conspiracy, then Cassius believes that the people will accept the murder of Caesar better if Brutus is there to explain why. And of course, this speaks a bit to what Cassius's motives are in wanting to take Caesar out. And we'd have to compare that, if you like, between Cassius's motives and Brutus's motives. Right? Cassius is seemingly, to some degree, almost jealous and annoyed that someone like Caesar, if you remember when he talks about Caesar being very frail, right? Not being, he talks about him almost drowning and so on, and why should he be put in such an elevated position over me or over you, Brutus? All right, so different motivations there for doing it. Brutus very much to preserve the Republic. Cassius for more individualized reasons. And don't forget as well how Caesar, with his flaws, his inability to hear, he doesn't listen to the soothsayer or the other warnings, but he is astute enough, right, to recognize that Cassio is someone to watch out for. Right? He says that obviously before he's murdered. Well, that, in a sense, mirrors the way that Brutus doesn't anticipate. All right, in the same way, this is where we can draw some parallels between Brutus and Caesar, is while they're both astute in certain areas, they're blind, right, unaware, or can't hear. All right, we have the physical manifestation of that in Caesar because he's deaf in an ear, so he doesn't listen to the soothsayer and so on. But of course, Brutus doesn't listen to Cassius when Cassius says, "Don't let Mark Antony speak." So there's some similar traits there. And of course, that speech that Mark Antony gives, how does that unfold, right? He follows Brutus and he starts saying that Brutus is saying that Caesar was overly ambitious and posed a threat and a danger to the Roman Republic. That's why we had to kill him. We did it for you, the people. As you're preparing for the exam, you look at that speech, note how Mark Antony begins by saying, listen, if Brutus is correct and Caesar was that ambitious, then of course it was the right thing to do. But then he starts taking apart Brutus's argument. Right? He says, but what is the ambition he's talking about? And he uses examples. He says, is this ambition? I don't think so. But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man, so it must be. But note how that speech, through the use of rhetorical devices, shifts to where he starts being sarcastic in the way that he refers to Brutus as an honorable man. And he basically dismantles Brutus's argument for killing Caesar and challenges Brutus as an honorable man. And that's an important question because it leads into the idea of intention. Brutus's actions, the reasons he chose to join the conspirators, were predicated on the idea of doing the right thing for the Roman people. That is conceivably an honorable position to be. in. But at the same time, when we talk about honor, to do it, he has to kill his friend, Caesar. He has to betray him. So we have the theme of betrayal. And can that be reconciled and to a degree joined with the concept of honor? And of course, Mark Antony in that brilliant speech, and remember, the brilliance of the way that he manipulates the people who, right before Mark Antony speaks, are all cheering and praising Brutus because of Brutus's speech. By the end of Mark Antony's speech, they've turned on Brutus. And this leads to war, right? Which we race through in Acts 4 and 5. Okay? Also in those first three, right now mainly talking about those first three acts leading up to the Mark Antony speech. Remember as well, something to be attentive to is nature, right? What's happening, right? What are people seeing in the streets before Caesar is killed, right? Strange things, natural, but almost supernatural. To a large extent, very supernatural. Fire falling from the sky, things like this, right? And we've seen this a lot in Shakespeare, how nature, what's happening in nature, actual nature and the supernatural, is a reflection of a disorder. When there's chaos, right, and people on fire in the streets of Rome, and weather, the storms, and everything else, it is reflecting a turmoil in the state, right? Anticipating in this case that there's going to be this turmoil. People interpret the supernatural things that are going on in nature in different ways at that point. Is it due to the impending assassination of Caesar? Is it anticipating what's going to happen, that the real disruption is going to be after the assassination? All drawing on the question of whether or not killing Caesar was the right thing to do. Okay? So those are the main areas you want to be looking at. Of course, what we have afterwards is, after the Mark Antony speech, when we get into Acts 4 and 5, you want to be attentive to all the characters, obviously, but particularly Brutus. Looking at him again is in terms of, has he done the right thing? Does he still believe he's done the right thing? Does he have any doubts that he's done the right thing? And of course, you want to look very closely at that interaction he has with Cassius. Remember, when they're fighting among themselves, and Brutus is chastising Cassius because Cassius is taking bribes, bribing people to get supplies and food for his army, because they've had to build armies to fight Mark Antony. And Brutus is angry at Cassius for doing it in an unsavory way, a dishonorable way. And Cassius is saying, well, what do you want me to do? I need money. We need money to pay for our army. So we have to do what we have to do. We have to be pragmatic and practical to do so. And Brutus is saying, but not like that, because that way is dishonorable. But what is also revealed in that exchange is that Brutus is also chastising Cassius because Cassius has not given him money that he needs, that Brutus needs for his army. So the implication there is Brutus is saying, the way you're getting your money is dishonorable. It's the wrong way to do it. I wouldn't do it that way. But I'm willing to take your money that you got that way. So perhaps a little bit of hypocrisy there, something to reflect on. Okay. You also want to be reflecting in terms of the character of Brutus and Cassius, as obviously the war doesn't go their way, in terms of how they both die. What's the difference in the way they die in terms of how we view them as individuals, but also how we view them as righteous, honorable men? Do we still? The method and means of their death, does that speak to the type of people they are? Is there any indications in Acts 4 and 5 that, particularly with Brutus, that he is acknowledging any culpability in what has turned out to be the disruption and turmoil in the state as a result of his actions? All right. So you see those basic elements that you want to be familiar with and you want to be looking for as you reread the play, elements in the exchanges that lend themselves to these themes, anticipating the type of question that where you can draw on these things. You certainly, again, want to be looking at Mark Antony's speech. You want to be looking at the character development of Brutus. You want to be asking yourself about Caesar. Did Caesar pose a threat? The concept of justice. Was this a just thing to do? To kill Caesar? And again, is there, in terms of Brutus, any kind of recognition or acceptance of responsibility for having perhaps not done the right thing? Be attentive to what Mark Antony says about Brutus at the end as well, because they obviously are combatants. And be thinking about everything that transpires in that speech that Mark Antony says. And ask yourself, while you're reading that speech, in relation to all these other things that we're talking about, is what Mark Antony says in that speech convincing? We talked about the fickleness of the people, right? Is he just manipulating them, playing with them because of his own ambition? Or is what he's saying what he believes to be the truth, that the conspirators were wrong to have killed Caesar? So what does Mark Antony truly believe? Or is Mark Antony just, remember Mark Antony's character, right? He's described as a bit of a playboy, right? That, and so we have to wonder how sincere his concerns are for the Roman state and the Roman people, as we do with Brutus. So again, you're looking at heroes and villains. You're looking at tyranny, power, ambition, right? Is Brutus ambitious? Do we get any indication of that? And again, back to Brutus's sense of honor, look at that scene when he is fighting in Act 4 with Cassius and the nature. We talked a lot about this in class, right? How do they resolve that argument? And what are their characters like in the heated exchange? Is it an honorable disagreement? Think about, and we've seen this a lot this semester with Shakespeare, the idea of fate, right? How much control does the individual have over their own fate? And in the case of the play, the fate of the Roman Empire or the Roman Republic. Again, this plays into the idea that the purpose, Brutus's purpose in carrying out the execution of Caesar, is to keep order to not let Caesar, through his ambition, become a tyrant and destroy the principles of the Roman Republic. It is done with the intent of making Rome a better place. But it has just the opposite effect. So the question would be, in terms of fate and what the possibilities of the future are, the question would be, what if they hadn't killed Caesar? Would Caesar have done and led Rome towards the same ultimate end, which is to become an empire with a tyrant and a single ruler, as Brutus feared? We can never know this, but then we look at, what if he hadn't killed Caesar versus that he did kill Caesar? Is he directly responsible by killing Caesar to leading Rome on this path? Or was it predestined to be so no matter what, whether he killed Caesar or not? Right? It's played with in the play. We talked about honor, rhetoric, and persuasion, the ability. Notice how Cassius persuades through rhetoric and some devious means to get Brutus on board with the conspirators, right? Act 2, I believe. Could be still Act 1, when he is feeling Brutus out. And I don't know, is he thinking a bit like I am? How can I get him over to my side? That very much is mirrored in Mark Antony's speech, where again, it is persuading an audience, whoever that audience is. Cassius's audience is Brutus. Mark Antony's audience are the people, and the means by which you're going to persuade them and perhaps manipulate them. And what does that say about the intentions and the ultimate goals that the individual has who is engaged in the persuasive speeches and so on? Ambition, right? Again, the whole idea of killing Caesar is predicated on their concerns and fear of him being overly ambitious. Was he? And Brutus? Is Brutus ambitious? Is Mark Antony ambitious? Is Cassius ambitious? You're thinking about the concept of ambition. Ethics and morality, that again comes down to, you're killing Caesar, you're killing your friend, right, for the better good. And how sure are you that it was for the better good? Is there justification for that kind of ethical behavior? All right. So again, are the conspirators justified in killing Caesar? It's a tough question. And remember, we don't have absolute answers here. Shakespeare never gives us that, right? These are the things that you want to be thinking about. And what are the qualities of a good leader? Was Caesar a good leader? Right? Remember, with his flaws, remember when he goes up and he's offered the crown 3 times and he denies. What was that about? Is that him trying to demonstrate his humility? Or is that him just saying, this would be a smart way to get the people on my side before I actually do take the crown? Because remember, he's going to accept it the next day. So what are the qualities of a good leader? Is Brutus a good leader? Because he pretty much becomes the leader of the conspirators once he's on board. And what about Mark Antony when he's leading the armies? So this idea and concept of leadership. Again, I don't want to keep this too long, so I'm going to be wrapping it up now, about a half hour. Remember the fickleness of the people of Rome. and how they change their minds. What does that say about a society? The superstitions that they are engaged in, how they react to the supernatural events that are occurring, and how that's a reflection of or an indication that something is amiss. And again, that turmoil that is represented by nature and the supernatural and the events that are happening are reflecting the turmoil and disruption in the state, but also the turmoil and disruption in the individual. Right? We see a lot of that on the individual side in Lear, right? Which I'll be posting another video to talk about that. I think that covers the areas that I want you to be more focused on, but a reminder, you do want to be familiar with all aspects of the play, because the question will be designed in such a way that you should be able to find, you will be able to find plenty of evidence and material from the text in any of the acts that you'll be able to utilize as a means of substantiating your claims, etc., depending on what direction you choose to take once you're answering the question on Monday. Okay, so again, familiarity with the play, the plot, but also all these other themes that I am reviewing with you now, that we've gone over in the class. Okay, and you're going to want to put them together, right? Because you're going to be making an argument. The question will lend itself to you taking a position, and then you're out to prove your point. All right, I think that covers it. Keep these things in mind. Check as well after I post this and over the weekend if I post any other bits of information. If I have a chance, I might throw some things up there that you can look at as well as reminders of what to anticipate. But really, this is just review. If you've been in class and you've been attentive and you've been taking notes, right? This is just review. And the key is to be as familiar with all this material as you can. You're going to have the book with you in the class, so you can reference exactly where you want to go when you are looking for the evidence to support the position you're taking. Okay. And yes, and again, attentive to the four main characters, I would argue: Brutus, Caesar, Mark Antony, and Cassius. And one last thing, if you want, be attentive to in Act 1, Scene 3, about line 140, when it said, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves." Okay, and that ties into the concept of fate and how much control we have over our own destiny. And the key there is the use of the word faults. Who's at fault? All right. Very good. This will be posted shortly as soon as it converts, and then I will have it up on Omnivox shortly. See you all on Monday.